I want to talk to you guys today about the Millionaire Next Door, the surprising secrets of America's wealthy. John, Stanley, and William Danko. These guys both have PhDs. They're super cool. And their whole book, what they're showing people to do, how to do, is take where they are and become wealthy. And it's really interesting. This was a little bit of an older book. I think it was like 1980s. And these guys go around and they make studies and they record how all these people got wealthy. And they literally interview, I think, like thousands of people, and they send them direct mail, and they're like, hey, can we give you $1 to interview you about how we got wealthy? And on top of that, they actually got a bunch of, and they were sending that mail to millionaires. They also got a bunch of millionaires to come into one room and have a big meeting, and they were trying to learn, exactly how individuals just attain wealth, especially through like a normal way, not of like increased income, but more so of compounding long-term annual growth. With like financial markets and asset returns, which is just killer stuff. And they found some tremendously amazing insights, that show, a lot about how you position yourself in the marketplace, what you use your money on, especially if you have like a limited budget, like say you have like a salary or you're working hourly wage, something like that, where you're not in direct control really of what you get paid to a certain extent. You can make a 10-20% change. Maybe you can't 10x it, you can't 20x it without changing your mindset or positioning in the marketplace to somehow take on some new, more entrepreneurial role, which is totally cool, right? It makes sense. You have an income. And they take all these millionaires and they find these tremendously insightful principles of like, hey, millionaires don't just waste all their money on stuff. They actually have budgets. It's crazy stuff, right? And they don't have credit cards that just accrue 24% interest. Like, that's insane. And if you guys haven't read like chapter 7 of 9 to Noon, or chapter 8 of 9 to Noon, like the book, like I think that's the chapter on debt, and it's like crazy how fast your debt can accumulate and just turn into this, snowball. It's like the same thing as compound growth, but instead of compound growth, you have compound debt, and it's just bad. It sucks, because these guys are in this situation where, anyway, a lot of people are in a place where they just stuck on debt, and it sucks because you got to get that stuff paid off. And what these guys show in the Millionaire Next Door is how to do that specifically by taking control of your personal finances and just setting basic budgets in place and not buying crap all the time, right? They talk about, this was kind of created in a time where keeping up with the Joneses was a really, big thing. It was like conformity with the Cold War, and like, oh my God, I sound like a history teacher, but essentially, right, these guys didn't want to look like they were Russian communists, so everyone was buying crap left and right, and no one was really saving. There was a really big consumer economy, and the same thing today, right? It's all the same today. So you look at those principles and insights and you realize, hey, these guys are literally changing their lives and becoming insanely wealthy by sticking with one car for 15-20 years because it makes sense for them given their situation and income, and it just doesn't make sense for them to have, buy a car every 2 or 3 or 4 years. And that's the same thing that was happening with these millionaires. They would hold their cars for long periods of time, or maybe make profits on them, flip them, whatever they did, so that they could minimize their cost of living and then use that lower cost of living to invest in, asset market, stock market, all the stuff we talk about in 9 to Noon, any other form of capital return where these guys are, essentially taking what they had before and they're multiplying their money in assets instead of buying liabilities that cost them money, or TVs, or whatever the latest thing is. And there were some really interesting insights from the story. The guy literally shows that like these millionaires spent less on their suits than the average American. They'd never spend, I think it was like 70-80% of the millionaires never spent more than like $300 at the time, like $500 inflation changed, like $500 on a suit. And that was so insightful. It's like, whoa, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a suit. These guys are millionaires, and they're not spending a bunch of cash on a suit. And at the same time, when they were at that big party, right, these guys weren't drinking beer, or they were drinking beer. They weren't drinking like vodka or liquor or whiskey. It just wasn't their thing because they weren't accustomed to that, and they were just growing up normal. And the way they got wealthy was by saving and investing. And it's one way to do it where you can turn any form of consistent normalized income into real savings and retirements by putting aside and saving for the future and then investing in the future. And it's like basic common sense, but there's so many great stories and principles that the book teaches that it like wouldn't make sense to learn outside of it, right? So, you know, when they talk about like being frugal, like they mean it, and they show how the people that were wealthy were overwhelmingly you know, conservative in their spending. And especially when you're young, how it makes significantly more sense to, you know, lower standard of living comparatively, but still have like a solid life and crush it personally at home, so that you can have, you know, profound success in the long term, where you're making sacrifices initially and you're really getting that upfront capital to invest in either yourself, if you're investing in education, or in you know, asset markets, stocks, you know, all the stuff we're talking about. But the point is that the only way to get to that point is to really say, you know, I'm going to make a commitment to myself to not waste money, not spend, you know, aimlessly. There's a rhyme and a reason to everything I do, and everything I do is going to be done so that I can have the maximum impact possible in the marketplace by completely ignoring arbitrary or unnecessary expenses, and rather turning those into fuel to spend more time, money, resources, energy, effort on the things that really matter, which is, you know, being with whoever, but less on material goods. And by not necessarily being frugal, but just having common sense and not blowing their money on a bunch of crap, you know, these guys, they're millionaires, right? So it was really, you know, not a book that I picked out. It was a suggestion by Pam, and it was cool because, you know, it was like not something I thought about, but it was something that I know that a lot of people have problems with, and it's a viewpoint that I've implemented in the book, and there's a little bit of it, not much, but like, you know, it matters, and it sucks that a lot of people, right, they're stuck in this point where they just don't, you know, think too much about it, and it's like an automatic response of, why would I save and invest if I could just go out and buy stuff, right? And this book shows that, like, here are millionaires. These are, you know, if this is your goal for finances, this is your goal for wealth, here's how these guys did it. They didn't blow the stuff off. They were absolutely crushing it in their personal finances, and then all they had to do was have average market returns, and they were wealthy. So it's really cool stuff. Like, if you want to take where you're at, and especially if you're having trouble balancing a budget, or if you're younger, or, you know, whatever it is you do. So I think it goes along with kind of like setting your baseline financials, so that you can really have that money to put aside to save and invest. It kind of goes alongside The Richest Man in Babylon. If you guys haven't seen my review of that book, I'll link it below. But this is a freaking good read, and I think it's really helpful. So I'll have that Amazon link below if you guys want to check this book out. Can't recommend it enough. And I hope you guys enjoy it. So I hope you find this valuable. Thanks so much, and have a good one. See ya. Bread. You cannot become wealthy if you do not fill yourself with quality fuel.